Rob here at etrailer.com, and today you're going to be taking a look at the SumoSprings front rebel helper springs on our 2016 Ford F53 Chassis Motorhome. Here at etrailer.com, we get a lot of questions about motorhomes, specifically about suspension upgrades. Because let's face it, if you're new to driving a motorhome or you've been doing it a while, it can be a little bit stressful. The motorhome's a really big vehicle, there's a lot of area for the wind to catch, which means that we're going to get pushed around. Whether we're driving down the highway and a big truck comes by or a gust of wind, there's a lot of area for it to catch, and then we end up fighting the steering wheel. By the time we get to where we're going, we're going to be exhausted because we're fighting the steering wheel, trying to keep it in the line. Not to mention everybody in the back's not enjoying themselves because they're getting tossed around, things are falling off the shelves and everything else. So there's got to be a way to feel more in control and actually enjoy your motorhome when you go on a trip. So before we do any installation, let's go ahead and take our motorhome out on our test course and see how it handles. As I'm going over the bumps here, I can definitely feel it jarring going through the seat, and it really doesn't want to react as quick. After I go over the bump, it continues to bounce, and it's kind of just an uncomfortable ride. And when we're at the alternating speed bumps, I really am having to fight the steering wheel to keep it going straight. And as I come through the slalom course, going in and out of the turns, it's definitely getting a lot of body roll. It's almost like the motorhome wants to lean before it turns. And really you just tell how top heavy this is, and it just genuinely feels like it needs to slow down so I have full control. So now that we have everything installed, let's take our motorhome back out on the test course and see how it improved the ride quality. Now that I take my motorhome out, now the suspension components are in place, don't get me wrong, going over the bumps I can still feel them, but it's not as jarring and it's not resonating through the seats, and the after effect is a lot more stable. We go over the bump, but we don't have to continually bounce as we're going down the road. It reacts and responds a lot more quicker and just feels a lot more stable. And on the alternating speed bumps, I definitely don't have as much of the back and forth where I'm trying to fight that steering wheel. It just kind of wants to stay pretty straight. Now as I come back to the slalom course with my components installed, I can immediately feel a difference. There's a lot less body roll in the motorhome, and when I turn, it wants to react a lot more quickly. Now it genuinely just feels like a smaller vehicle, and it's a lot easier to handle. I'm not fighting the steering wheel as much, and I don't have to anticipate the body roll. Like I said, as soon as I turn, it just starts to turn. There's no mushy feeling and that really leaning feeling going on. So here's what our SumoSprings look like once we have them installed. Now these are going to give us a lot more support for all that extra weight we have on our motorhome, like the slide outs or anything else that we may have towards the front. But it's also going to give us a nice, smooth, comfortable ride. The way they're going to do that is they're going to attach directly to the frame and on top of our leaf springs, so they're always going to be in contact, giving us the support we need, but they're also going to absorb a lot of that road shock so we can enjoy our motorhome and not have to worry about that jarring feeling whenever we hit bumps. Now since we're going to have one Sumo spring on each side of our axle, they're also going to help reduce the sway and body roll that we feel. Because as one side gets compressed when we go through a turn, the other side is going to expand, stretching out, so it'll help keep it nice and level, and we won't have so much rolling of feeling that we get. What I really like about this design is the fact that they are two separate pieces. Right now the weight's on our motorhomes, so they're compressed together, but if we were to hit a bump and we have the rebound, where the axle will come back and stretch out a little bit, the top is actually separate from the bottom, so we're not limiting ourselves on our suspension travel. Our springs are going to be progressive, which means that the more weight we put on them, the more compressed they're going to get and the stiffer they're going to become. But if we don't have that much weight on them, or if it's less weight in our motorhome, they're going to engage more softly and not compress as much. So we can make sure that even when we're driving down the road unloaded, we'll have a nice comfortable ride, but when we have all that extra weight in there, these will help out with the support. The springs themselves are made out of a microcellular urethane, and if we're taking a trip up in the mountains where it gets pretty cold, we're not going to have to worry about anything because our springs are going to work all the way down to negative 25 degrees Fahrenheit. But on the other side, if we're down in the desert where it gets pretty warm, these are going to work all the way up to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and they are going to withstand most automotive chemicals like road salt, oil, and even gasoline. So whether it's coming from the motorhome or the environment, we're not going to have to worry about anything damaging these. One of the best things about our springs is that once they're installed, we can completely forget about them. They're completely maintenance free, so we're not going to have to worry about maintaining them or checking on them, unlike some other suspension upgrades, like airbags. Airbags are nice, but we have to worry about running lines, maintaining the pressure, and it's just a lot more involved. Our springs are going to come with everything we need to get them installed, all the brackets, hardware, and the springs themselves. So now that we've seen what our springs look like and gone over some of the features, let's put one side on together. To begin our installation, we want to park our motorhome on a nice flat level ground, and then we're going to use our leveling jacks to raise the front end up. Now we can leave the tires on the ground, but we want to stretch that front suspension out so we have a little bit of working room underneath. So now we can move underneath to the front axle. So if we come underneath, right above the front axle here, if we look up to the frame, we'll find our factory joust stop. And we're going to remove this. There's a hole on the bottom where we can access the bolt. So we'll grab a short extension and a 13mm socket, and we'll break the bolt loose, and then we'll pull it out. Now once everything's removed, we want to pull the bolt out, and we're going to hold on to that, but we can get rid of the joust stop. So now we can grab our upper bracket. Now you notice that we're going to have 3 holes, one on either side and one in the center. We want to grab the factory bolt. We're going to come from the bottom, going through the bracket, going up. Then we'll grab 2 3/8 flange bolts. You want to make sure those are going down from the top through the bracket. Now you'll notice it's going to have these little tabs on here. These tabs need to hook onto the inside of the frame. And we'll lift our bracket up, and for now we're just going to loosely attach the bolt so it'll hold itself and we won't have to worry about the bracket falling off. We can grab our 13mm socket. And again, you kind of want to make sure those tabs are hooking onto the inside of the frame there, so I'll just lift it up and tighten up the bolt. You want to make sure that these bolts are in place before you tighten it, because we're not going to be able to put them in after the bracket's tightened down. Now we're going to grab our upper spring. There's going to be 4 holes in the top, and if we flip it over, we're going to have a large opening on the bottom of the spring. 2 of these threaded holes are going to match up with the bolts coming down through the bracket. So we're going to lift it up, line up our holes, and then very loosely just secure those bolts by hand so that it'll hold the spring up and we won't have to worry about it falling down. Now because of the limited space between the bracket and the frame, I'm going to use a 9/16 ratcheting wrench to tighten up the 2 bolts. And when you do this, you kind of want to alternate going back and forth between the 2 bolts so your wrench doesn't get stuck. And once the upper bracket's secure, we can grab our lower section that has our lower spring and lower bracket on it. Now it's a little hard to notice, but if we look at our lower bracket, one side is going to be longer than the other. And you want the longer side to be facing towards the middle, or towards the inside of our motorhome. So we'll place our spring directly over the leaf spring pack on the front axle here, just kind of roughly lining it up with the upper spring. We'll grab one of the black bolts out of our kit, and we'll drop them down through each one of the holes. And we'll follow it up with a flat washer. Just make sure the washer goes up to the top of the bolt, and then right underneath our leaf spring, that upper plate here, it's going to have an open spot on the bottom. So we want to grab our J hooks. We'll line up that hook to where it's going. I'm going to grab onto it, and also where the bolt's going to drop down through the bottom. Then we'll grab one of the 3/8 flange nuts out of our kit and loosely secure it so it'll hold the J bracket in place. And then we'll do the same thing on the other side of our spring. I'm going to use a 9/16 wrench and socket just to snug up my bolts here. That way that J hook stays in place. I'm just going to snug up one side, make any adjustments that I need to, and snug up the other side. With our bolts snug down, we're going to verify that the spring is still lined up with the upper section, and then we'll grab a 9/16 socket and wrench again, and we'll tighten everything down and make sure it's nice and secure. And with this side done, we can go ahead and repeat the same process on the other side of our motorhome. The only thing that's going to be different about our driver's side is that the frame is going to be open here and it doesn't use a factory weld nut. So we are going to use a 15mm wrench to hold the nut on top of the frame here. But that'll finish up your look at the SumoSprings front rebel helper springs on our 2016 Ford F53 Chassis Motorhome.